It's Weighing In, NJ.com's high school wrestling podcast.
How's it going, everyone? Ryan Patti from NJ.com here, joined by my three fellow New Jersey high school wrestling experts, and Bill Evans, Joe Zedalis, and Jake Aferiat, and you're listening to episode number 7 of Weighing In, your go-to New Jersey high school wrestling podcast. It's an action-packed episode. We have 7 state finals we're going to recap to start things off, and we're also going to talk about the sectional finals and state semifinals a little bit, since we didn't get the chance to talk about that. The sectional finals for the public schools, that is, because there were a few individual matchups that raised some eyebrows. And Joe was down there at Brick to see one of them go down. But we also have other weight classes that we want to talk about now that the individual postseason stretch is here. And obviously, we're going to talk about the districts as much as we can. They're being seeded on Thursday, but we know where the teams are going to be, and not necessarily all the weight classes, but some. And we're going to be able to touch on a few of them and kind of what we see happening there. But to start some of these state finals recaps, I think it's appropriate to start with non-public A, because for the second time in 2 years, St. Joe's took down Delbarton. And this win was not as surprising as it was 2 years ago, where I had one parent, I don't want to mention them by name, they said it was divine intervention, for us to win 2 years ago. This year, not as much. I mean, 8 state medalists. And like I said, JoJo Burke and Christian Alvarez are 2 kids that are wrestling to that potential right now. And I think Ryan Mitchell's also in that discussion now. Burke closed out this match with an 8-6 decision over PJ Terranova. And we all picked against St. Joe's, yes. But when I scored this one, I actually had Delby winning 28-27 on criteria. And I didn't have a whole lot different from what actually happened. I predicted every bout and margin of victory correctly, besides a couple of them. And I usually don't toot my own horn with this kind of stuff, but I just wanted to share how close I actually, thought it was going to be. And I had Mikey Batista only by decision over Braden Jones, and he went out and got a major. And Trevor Jones, I only had him by decision against Joe Peretti, and he wound up teching him. Peretti's been battling an injury, and I think he's the type of kid who's going to make the state tournament, but he's clearly going through something right now. And Ryan Burton, I had him pinning Jesse Denegri, and Denegri actually stayed off his back and held him to a tech. But the big one, and the one that, in my opinion, decided this match, was Vinny Paino's win over Ryan DeGeorge. And I did not have that happening. But when you look at the week that Vinny Paino had, he beat Gino Shanina in a bout that St. Peter's had to win in the semifinals. He wrestled well on Tuesday. And, it's really not a surprise that he won. And he's wrestled a lot of these kids in the offseason, but he kind of hasn't had the opportunity yet to do it on the mat for real. In live action, and he did, and he was the hero this year. And 2 years ago was Mateo Scambolone against Tyler Vasquez, a 2-time state champ. And Bill put out a story on Sunday, and it's that you kind of have to beat a state champ if you want to beat Delbarton, and that's what Vinny did on Sunday. Bill, what'd you take away from non-public D? Another duel that came down to the wire here, and it was much different than it was earlier this season between Camden Catholic and Pope John.
Yeah, the non-public Bs last couple of years have also been pretty good. Vianney did beat Camden Catholic, I guess, somewhat handily last year when they had a big swing at heavyweight. But we remember 2 years ago when it came down to Vianney and Camden Catholic and Cage Jones beating Patrick O'Keefe, and Camden Catholic ended up winning a real close match. This one, Camden Catholic had beaten Pope John fairly handily earlier this year. We thought it might be a little bit closer, and it was actually a lot closer. Sammy Spalding beat Dalton Weber in the second match for the second time this year. This time he beat him 4-1. Earlier this year he beat him 7-0. Last year Dalton Weber pinned Sammy Spalding in the third place match at States. So that was kind of the rubber match there, and one that I guess Pope John really felt like they needed it, and it turned out it was one that the Camden Catholic ended up needing, because they were off and running at that point, up 9-0, and Pope John just kind of dug themselves back in it. They got a 7-5 decision from Sean Ballman at 2:15. They got a big pin at heavyweight from Jared Francesco, and that kind of at that point kind of gave Pope John a shot. Unfortunately, Pope John does not have a 6-pounder. They forfeited 106. And then Jake Holly beat Dom DiGiacomo, who was undefeated for Camden Catholic. He came back in the middle of the season, so he'd only had about 9 matches, but still it was 9-0, and that got Pope John a 4-point lead going into the final match, and Chase Martino came in, was favored in that match, and ended up getting the first period pin, and Camden Catholic won as we all expected. But credit to Pope John, that they really kind of pretty much gave their best effort here for the most part. And again, came down to Sammy Spalding being able to beat Weber for the second time. Camden Catholic ended up the year undefeated, the only undefeated team in the state. Surprisingly, it was Camden Catholic's first ever undefeated state championship season. This was Camden Catholic's 19th state championship, and in the previous 18, that they had never been undefeated. Even one year they were number one. They had a loss. Their last undefeated season was 1975. They had a tie, and in 1974, they had an undefeated, untied season. So it's been over 50 years since Camden Catholic had a perfect season, and they did so this year. I know Coach Bill Heverly had told me, and told you, Ryan, about a story about they had a trophy from the last undefeated season in the corner of the wrestling room. It's 5 decades old, and it's falling apart. So now they'll have a nice shiny one to put into that spot.
Yeah, they get a fresh trophy now. And you mentioned that Spalding-Weber decision. It was kind of like the Paino DeGeorge decision in non-public A. But Jake, you had Del get back on top there in Group 1. And I picked Hanover Park. I was at the Hanover Park Paulsboro match, and Hanover Park was on a tear. They wrestled a great schedule, but I mean, none of that mattered. They ran into Del Val, and Del Val was an absolute buzzsaw.
Yeah, and again, I mean, the big thing for the Terriers this year, so they won in 2022 and 2023. They lost last year by 8 to Paulsboro, and Del Val coach Andy Fitz told me on Sunday afterward, like that loss had stuck with them basically from the bus ride home from Jersey Mike's Arena last year up until they got back on Sunday. And he said the one thing that, he talked about with his assistants and that really stood out to them is they wrestle really well at home, but they've been known to lay an egg. And those were his words on the road in the past. And so I think, you saw you saw Del Val try to counteract that this year by going on the road and wrestling Ridge, going on the road and wrestling Watchung Hills, wrestling Caldwell away from home, wrestling Cranford on the road, wrestling Kittatinny on the road, wrestling Bridgewater-Raritan on the road. And so I think, by winning a lot of those matches more often than not, I think that helped prepare them. But I mean, the other thing too is, they were utterly dominant. I mean, they gave up 16 team points to Hanover Park. That was the most team points they've given up all postseason. I mean, through their entire Central Group 1 run, they gave up just 21 team points, and they were scoring in the 60s and 70s. So, I mean, they were thoroughly dominating teams. And, the big key for Del Val in Sunday's win was just the amount of bonus points they got. They won 10 bouts. They got 8 bonus point wins, including 5 in a row or 6 in a row from 150 to 190. And it was all pins and tech falls. It wasn't like they were just getting majors or anything like that. So, I think they really impressed me with just how dominant they were. They only got taken down 7 times, so they wrestled really well on their feet, which I think was impressive. And, the thing at a school like Del Val, it's a Group 1 school, tiny, maybe doesn't have the numbers, is sometimes it's some of the more unheralded guys who step up. Jaden Perez, who's a state medalist for them, a Drexel commit, he tech-falled Nick DiFrancesco Antonio, who's a state qualifier for Hanover Park, 17-0, like right out of the gate. So already that was a statement. But really, it was, guys like Olivier Paul at 165, or Marcus Gary, the sophomore, at 175, or Brandon Szanski at 190, who actually clinched it for them. And, Szanski told me afterward, he didn't wrestle in last year's state final because he blew out his shoulder at HWS. So he was watching that team last year lose to Paulsboro and just kind of hoping that he could be out there. And so, he was just really hungry to be out there and to clinch it. And, it's funny, Andy Fitz is a math teacher, and he said he was going through all the different permutations, and he calculated all the, miles that they drove and everything like that. And he said, they needed luck on their side. I mean, sometimes in sports it's better to be lucky than good. And he said, guys brought 4-leaf clovers with them and Lucky Charms, but luck had nothing to do with it. Delval was just flat out a better team. They wrestled better. They got, they won a lot of these toss-up bouts on paper. They got bonus in the process. So I was pretty thoroughly impressed by what I saw from them.
Yeah, you mentioned Jaden Perez. He actually tech-fauled Devin Ryan, too, in the semifinals. He had a heck of a week. And I mentioned Vinny Paino had a great week, and he actually took 2 forfeits on Tuesday. I mentioned he wrestled well on Tuesday, but he took 2 forfeits. There were a couple guys. We don't put our wrestlers of the week out there at this point in the season, but there's a couple guys that really showed, they were the wrestler of the week last week. And, Joe, you saw some great wrestling in Group 2 with Rumson and Caldwell, and it was kind of a match that got a little close there at the end. Rumson didn't have one of their best wrestlers, but it's a match that even with him, it was maybe a little bit closer than we thought it was going to be.
Absolutely, Ryan. I thought the Caldwell boys wrestled their tails off. They went out there and did not seem intimidated whatsoever. They were in a lot of the bouts. I mean, the one thing that Rumson does to other teams is they just have enormous bonus capability. I mean, they won 6 bouts by bonus there. And that's what Rumson does to people. Yes, they were missing Connor Delaney, who's 31-1. And I feel like if Delaney is in the lineup, it doesn't come down to that must-win scenario in the final bout for Rumson. But, that's what Rumson does. They just go about their business. They're really matter of fact, when they go out and wrestle. They've been dominant all year. I think they have earned the #1 public school in New Jersey rating. Like I said, I just think Caldwell gave it its best effort, but Rumson just had a little too much for them in the end.
Yep. No, that ended up being a great match. And Rumson, you said it. They are the top public school in the state this year. And that lineup, was a buzzsaw. They were absolutely loaded all season. And talking about buzzsaws, Bill, you saw Delsea again go out on top in Group 3. And, they fended off a brick team that, was never really in it, but they never fully went away. I mean, there were opportunities there, in the middle where, if they flip a match or 2 here or there. But Delsea, again, champs. I mean, they're fantastic.
It started at probably the worst possible weight for Brick Memorial. They would have preferred probably to get started in the upper middle weights or the upper weights. Brick Memorial is outstanding from 90 through heavyweight, and then also at 106. So if they could have got a start there, they could have got a little bit of a lead, and then obviously Delsea probably would have come back anyway. But starting at 126, Delsea bumped Grayson Pettit up 2 weight classes and he ended up getting a tech fall, and then they bumped Gage Summers up from 126 to 132. He actually fell behind 6-2 in his match and came back, took the lead in the third period and got a pin. They were up 11-0, and Coach Tom Maxwell, said they were favored at both of those matches. They expected to win them, but they weren't really expecting bonus points. And there was an extra 5 points, which really came into play later on. They didn't have to sweat things out. Obviously we remember Brick Memorial against Cranford, down 35-14, came back to win that match 36-35. Delsea just went on a run there. Brick Memorial's not strong in the middle. Delsea has some hammers there. They went up 33-0. They were up 39-3 before Brick Memorial's big guns came onto the mat, and it was basically over by the heavyweight match. Even though Ben Zuba got a very nice win over Sal Marquez, the fact that it was only a decision that clinched the match with the 3 weights to go. Delsea now 4-time state champs, 4 consecutive state championships. So their seniors go out, without having ever lost a playoff match. Tom Maxwell, in his first year as head coach, after 29 years as assistant, gets his first championship as a head coach. And they were pretty dominant all year they lost 2 matches. They lost to St. John Vianney, who they did not match up with at all. And they had a hiccup against St. Augustine, who I think maybe they beat on most days. They did not that day, but that happened right before the playoffs. I know the Delsea coaches looked at that as almost a good thing. They got exposed in some areas. They let some matches get away from them in the third period, and it gave them something to kind of focus on and work on as they prepared for the postseason. And they really just tore through, the playoffs to beat a Lacey team in the sectional final 69-6 that we had ranked at the time, to go through an undefeated Wayne Valley team 50-21, and then just to handle, obviously a very good Brick Memorial team that we've had ranked for most of the year as well. Just another tremendous performance for them. They'll lose some seniors, but they still have a lot, left in the pipeline, and they'll probably be the favorites again going into next year.
Joe, do you have anything you want to add on Brick Memorial's end?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I wrote in my portion of the Group 3 preview was, if you're going to beat Brick Memorial, you have to beat one of the big five. And Delsea was able to do that. And really what Brick Memorial accomplished, they did it with mirrors all year. Brick Memorial finished last in its division. But of course, that's a division with Southern, CBA, Rumson-Fair, Haven, and St. John Vianney. So, the one thing that really is the burr in my saddle is this, and I'm on the forfeit kick again. Harvey Luddington went out. Delsea had two guys weighed in at 190 and threw him a fist. If he wins his third state title, he's going to go down as one of the greatest in New Jersey wrestling history. And this was his last appearance in the groups, and he didn't get to wrestle. So, that bothered me a little bit, especially because they did have the two guys there. There is no other dual meet coming up, but I guess as a coach, you do what you got to do. But, Brick Memorial all year, Ryan, had five guys, and then they scrounged for another win or two. I think Mike Kiley did one of his best coaching jobs. They're going to lose a couple of guys. They're going to lose Zuba, and they're going to lose Luddington. And I don't really know how you replace those two guys, but I think Brick Memorial went as far, if not farther, than we all thought they would.
Yeah, they took everyone's best shot in the Shore, and they had a great season. Jake, part 2 of North Hunterdon and Peaburg lived up to the hype, but same winner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So North Hunterdon and Peaburg wrestled twice this year. First time was back on January 29th. North Hunterdon won that one 34-24, and that was kind of at the time where we weren't quite sure what we were getting in this North Hunterdon team. They weren't ranked at that point. Peaburg was number 11 in the state. But, up to that point, North Hunterdon had some big wins already, took a couple of losses. They had beaten Del Val, they had beaten Immaculata, but they had just lost to Rumson and Ocean. And then, to kind of go back and then beat Phillipsburg, I think that was a big win for them at the time, even bigger now to do it twice. And, it's funny, Peaburg beat Mount Olive twice too, which I think shouldn't be lost in all this of, they wrestled back in December to a 2-point match. They wrestled in the North 1 Group 4 section final. That was a 2-point match. So, Phillipsburg had a good year. North Hunterdon just seemed to be kind of the one hurdle they couldn't get past. And, Dave Bell told me a couple of summers ago when he had taken the North Hunterdon job, kind of the reverence that he had for Phillipsburg as a program, even when he was at Bergen Catholic. But, he and former Peaburg coach Rick Thompson were good friends from their days wrestling together at Slippery Rock. And so, you can tell kind of what, that Dave Bell gets it, that he understands what it means to beat Phillipsburg, not just once, but to do it twice and to do it to win a state title. I mean, the thing for me that really stood out is, Phillipsburg didn't flip a single bout from, the last meeting. They saved bonus in some spots and chased points in some spots, losing by decision versus major or teching a kid versus majoring him. But in terms of actual bouts, they didn't flip a single one. And I think that's kind of what did the liners in, especially if you look at a weight like 215, where Anthony Simone, who entered Sunday 8-16 on the year, was wrestling against Phillipsburg's 215-pounder, Kevin Buonacore. And granted, Buonacore was giving up like 20 pounds on D. Simone. But still, that's a match that, was tied 6-6. Buonacore got a late escape. D. Simone got the winning takedown with 23 seconds left. So, if that match goes Peaburg's way, the liners are still in it. They still have a chance. It probably comes down to 106. But, I think the thing, and, Joe and I mentioned this, the thing that's most impressive is, yes, the year-over-year turnaround. North Hunterdon was 7-13 last year. They finished this year 17-6. But really, to me, what it shows is, that Dave Bell can coach his ass off. I mean, he is a great wrestling coach. At Bergen Catholic, it's easy when you're getting guys like Nick Soriano, Josh McKenzie, Joe Grello, you name it, the kind of all-star caliber list of guys that were in that room for Dave at Bergen. But, he has good kids at North Hunterdon. Aiden Ursi was a state qualifier. Evan Kinney was a state qualifier. Reed Busby was a state qualifier. But he doesn't have, a Nick Soriano or something like that. And so to be able to lead this team to a state title on the backs of, guys who are good but maybe not, sensational wrestlers, I think to me that's got to be one of the best coaching jobs that he's done, and certainly one of the best coaching jobs in the state this season. And this is a program that's won a lot. I mean, they were 23-0 a couple of years ago when Chris Franca led them to a state title. They beat Jackson Memorial in the state final or the state semis a few years ago, I know, in a win where Jackson was probably favored going into that one. So this is a program with a lot of tradition. And I think after a down year, after a transition year, I think you're going to see, Dave Bell continue to lead North Hunterdon to top 20 finishes, to deep state tournament runs. So I was thoroughly impressed kind of by what I saw from North.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those, there were a lot of toss-up matches, in both of those duels, and North Hunterdon won a lot of them, and that goes to Dave Bell in the corner there. He's one of the best ever. So hats off to him and North Hunterdon on another successful year, another championship season. Joe, Southern dominant once again. They're the kings of Group 5, and they took it to Bridgewater from the first whistle.
You know what? It was just what's become another Southern postseason run yawn. 58-18, a 40-point win, Ryan, and that was larger than the margin they beat Phillipsburg the last 2 years. And much of the talk this year has centered around Southern missing 2 state place winners, Bryce Manera at 132, Hayden Hochstrasser at 175. So, Southern had to rally the troops to be able to bridge the gap over those 2 holes. And really, they did it successfully. Again, what Southern does best in every match they wrestle is not give up points and score a bunch. The Southern wrestlers went 61-10 in their 5 state tournament wins. 61-10. They only lost 2 bouts in a row once, and that's when they forfeited back-to-back classes to Washington Township earlier in the tournament. Dan Roy and his staff know how to get teams ready for the state tournament, and they are just clearly the class of Group 5, with no offense to anybody else. Their senior class went to the group finals 4 times and won 3. So, Southern's going to have to rebuild a little, but as Dan Roy noted, because of those 2 injuries, there were younger kids who got varsity match experiences that had those 2 weather boys been healthy, they would not have gotten. And just a little note on those 2 guys. Dan Roy told us on Sunday that Bryce Manera attempted to come back. He came to practice, lasted about 45 minutes before he re-injured the ankle. The status on Hochstrasser is a little different. Dan said they don't know yet. So we'll just have to wait and see if he is entered in the district tournament this weekend. But as for Southern, the beat goes on.
Yeah, we're going to find out about Hochstrasser on Thursday when the district tournaments are seeded. But like I said, we didn't get the chance to talk about some of the stuff that happened earlier last week in the sectional finals and state semifinals. There was a lot that happened, a lot of individual results. Something that surprised me was, the past couple of days Adrian DeJesus has had, and he lost 3 times, starting with Tuesday in the non-public A quarterfinals when Bobby Duffy pinned him. That was right after we recorded the last episode. And then Caden Ricciardi beat him 11-4 on Thursday in a decision that Ricciardi blew open pretty quickly. And then Chase Connaught beat him 9-2 on Sunday in a matchup that was a lot closer. And, Adrian took a shot that Chase just, had the answer for and put him to his back. But DeJesus after that was in a neck brace, and, he's clearly not himself. And he had tears in his eyes, and, Coach Farinara was very emotional as well, because who knows what's going to happen here. Like, I don't want to say that he's not going to wrestle, but it sure seems like he's not going to, with how injured he clearly seems. And, he injured it at the Beast of the East. I don't know the details of it, but, it's possible that he maybe came back too early, but put his body on the line for his team, and it mattered. He stayed off his back twice there in the match against Ricciardi. and in the match against Connaught, where you never know what could happen if one of those two gets 6 points. But like I said, I don't have intel yet for the rest of his postseason. But again, I'm not too optimistic there, and my heart goes out to Adrian, 2-time state champ, just a heck of a wrestler. And whatever happens here these next couple of days, whether he enters or not, he's going to go down as one of the best in recent years in this state. But another situation that kind of caught my attention was Nicky Polito's win over Ryan DeGeorge. We mentioned Taino's win over him, but Nicky Polito got it done as well. And he's another name in the mix now at 132. Bill already mentioned Sammy Spalding and Dalton Weber. It's a weight we've talked about a lot, ad nauseum on this podcast, how good it is. A lot of state medalists in there, a lot of kids. It probably goes, 10 to 15 deep, but Polito has thrown his name into the hat here. He was in a close match last year in a duel against DeJesus, believe it or not. He's a scrappy wrestler. He won a county championship this year, was a runner-up last year to DeJesus. But yeah, 132, another name in it now in Nicky Polito. Bill, what's the weight that has what's the result, that has your attention? You had a couple kids make some statements in South Jersey, one being Andre Hill. I saw him, in that match against Hanover Park, and he really, really impressed me. And he might be going at a different weight class.
Yeah, we're expecting Andre Hill to go down to 120 for the postseason. He's been, Paul Spro's had a lot of up and downs as we talked about this year. He's one kid that's been pretty consistent in those lower weights, and I think at that weight, he could definitely make a run. You mentioned that the win over DeFrancesco Antonio, got them off to a good start. Paul Spro's, had, like I said, an up and down year, but still ended up winning a sectional title that they've won all but one since they started giving them out in 1980. Ran out of gas in the state semifinal against Hanover Park, which was not unexpected. I think this was really a Paul Spro team that despite the record, which looks unseemly based on what they normally do, really maxed out this season. And Hill's going to be one of those guys, I think, in the postseason for them, that's going to keep them going all the way to Atlantic City, along with maybe a Sawyer Cabanas in the middle. Jared Hazel up top's had a really good year, but he's going to be in a very tough weight class once he gets to the region. And another thing, lower Cape May Middle Township, we didn't really, wrestled an all-time match in their sectional final. And one kid that came up with a big win there was Dante Kelly with a 12-11 decision down low over Connor Barikian. And then they got a big win later on from Robert Attenborough at 165 over Shea Morrell, although there was a lot of controversy there. There were back points clearly given after the buzzer that may have turned things around. And for Lower Cape May, David Douglas had a sudden victory win over Noah Nagel that a lot of people are saying was a pin that was not called. Middle Township ended up winning their first ever sectional title on criteria after Maximus Adalizzi, who I expect to have a very good postseason himself at 190. Got a takedown with 20 seconds left for a major decision. So there were a lot of individual results in that matchup that were very intriguing to me and kind of set the tone because those teams are both in the same district, which we'll talk about later on, and we'll probably get to see a lot of rematches next week.
Joe and Jake, we already talked about Brick and we already talked about Harvey Ludington, but somehow we resisted the urge here to talk about that match against Jordan Chapman the other day. A thriller, an absolute thriller. I want to give both you guys the chance to talk about it. And Chapman has his weight class. We've found out what weight class he will be at. So Joe, we'll start with you. You were there. How awesome was that match there between Harvey Ludington and Jordan Chapman?
It was incredible and much tighter than the first one, which ended with Ludington winning 16-6. And what was so amazing and impressive is that Jordan Chapman rode out Harvey Ludington the entire second period, and then for probably a minute and 30 seconds or more in the second period. And folks, Harvey couldn't even get to his feet. The only way he got to his feet was with 33 seconds left in the third. Chapman was called for stalling. It was his second one. The Caldwell people weren't happy about it, but let's face it, you're not trying to turn Harvey Ludington there. You're just trying to keep him at bay. And he was riding parallel. So they go back to the center, and then like something out of Hulk Hogan and WrestleMania, all of a sudden Harvey is rejuvenated and he gets up and he escapes. And then he quickly turns and fires off this explosive double for the takedown, and he holds on for the win. And let's face it, that win, if Chapman wins, the match is over. Cranford clinches it. Instead, Brick Memorial takes that, runs with it, wins the last 4 matches, 4 bouts. Technical fall by Trey Talmadge, technical fall by Ben Zuva at heavy, pin by Sonny DiMatteo at 6, and Michael Napolitano with his bench yelling in unison, cut him, cut him, cut him, ignores him, works to a cradle, and pins him to win the match 36-35. Now, there was a controversial, unnecessary roughness call after the 138-pound bout. I won't go into what was called, why it was called. There's a lot of speculation about that. But had it gone to criteria, Brick Memorial would have won on most pins 4-3. It was really a terrific wrestling match. And, it's something this sport needs. Jake, talk a little bit on the decision Chapman has now going into the Indy postseason.
Yeah, and so conventional wisdom, I guess, would tell you that, okay, here's this kid who's going to Rutgers, one of the best wrestlers in the state, but it's kind of in between a rock and a hard place. If he sucked down to 65, he would run into Alessio Parrington, who beat him in the state final last year. If he stays at 75, he's got St. Joe's stud Ryan Burton, who was a state champ. Or if he sticks at 90, does a possible third meeting with Ludington in the postseason finally go Chapman's way? But, we're not going to get a chance to see if the third time's the charm for Chapman, because Coach Pat Gorman confirmed to me late last night that Chapman's, in fact, going 175 for the postseason, which means he'll be matched up with Burton. And that won't be an easy task. But I think, one, the fact that he was so close with Ludington this time shows just what he's capable of. And, the fact that, obviously Burton's excellent. He's taken some losses against Will Hankel from Blair and a few other kids who are, maybe a touch above Chapman, but Chapman's right there. And, I think Chapman gave Parrington fits last year. I think Chapman will give Burton fits again this year. If Chapman somehow found a way to win, Chapman's incredibly explosive. Like Joe said, he's got a really tough ride. A Chapman win certainly would not stun me in the least. I think here's a kid who's got all the talent in the world. He just came along kind of the wrong 4-year stretch where he's sandwiched between a bunch of hammers and in an inopportune weight class where he's, kind of everywhere he looks, there are great guys. But yeah, so Chapman's going 175. I think he's got, a pretty clear path to a final with Burton. And I think that final could be one of the best in Atlantic City. So, if it happens, great. But, I think to Joe's point, and, I think we said this the first time, I give Gorman and Chapman and Mike Kiley and Ludington a lot of credit. They didn't have to bump Jordan up to wrestle Harvey. They could have gotten 6 somewhere else and then said, hey, we'll deal with, Brick getting 6 at 90. But, that's twice this year that Chapman's gone up and wrestled one of the best kids in the state. And, you're not going to see many other kids who've gone up to do that, especially a kid of Harvey's caliber. So I think, last week we talked about forfeits, and even Joe alluded to it a little bit. At a time and a place where forfeits are so prevalent, to see a bout like that, I think is so refreshing and so needed.
Yeah, I think like you said, you have to give the credit to Chapman, and you could see how hungry he is and how tough that decision is. But we have that decision now. And remember, last year he took Parrington to his back, but they blew the whistle because it was a bit of a slam. He took him down hard. People still talk about that. I think Alessio would have ended up winning that bout anyway, but people still talk about that moment. And Harvey's not out of the woods yet because Vincenzo Laval has his decision as well, and he's going 190. And I know that matchup last year in the state final was a little lopsided, but Vincenzo, like I said, he's wrestling well, and it could be interesting if he knows about that result with Chapman against Ludington. He knows that it was close, and if he wrestles well, he believes in himself that he can get it done. He thinks that it's there for the taking. So on the note of weight classes, I wanted to talk about a couple more of them. A couple episodes ago, we did mention a few, but there's kids who have descended now. A couple kids will be going up in weight, but one of the classes I wanted to talk about was 285. And Rocco Delegata, St. John Vianney Hammer, he's still my pick to win it. He was last year's champ. And he's pound for pound, in my opinion, one of the top 10 kids in the state. But, I don't think the gap is that wide here at this weight. And, he's got a target on his back. And a couple years ago, Jimmy Mullen had a target on his back. And Max Acciardi, who had lost to him over and over again, gave him everything that he could handle there in that state final. And there's kids at this weight that can provide tests. And I think it starts with Christian Alvarez, who sat behind Rocco and learned, how to be a great wrestler, how to be a great heavyweight wrestler. On Tuesday, Delegata beat Benji Shu, but it was close. It was 4-2. And, a lot of people were saying that takedown that he had was a little fast. I thought it was a takedown, but it did look a little quick. James Lynch, Mateo Vinciguerra, Clifford Dirks, these are all kids who I think are, going to make the podium in Atlantic City, at least, going to compete for a spot on the podium. And Vinciguerra and Dirks will meet in the region final. And that's one I know Bill is very excited about. And Dirks and Delegata are the two here who are undefeated at this weight. And, even Thursday, Connor Reynolds kept it close with Christian Alvarez. And, I never thought that Alvarez was going to lose that bout, but, that was one takedown away from getting a little interesting. And like I said, Delegata is my pick. He's going to remain my pick going into Atlantic City, but I think a state final could get tight. And I'm interested to see how that podium would end up shaking out. Anyone who makes that podium should be very proud of the job they did. Bill, what's the weight class that's caught your attention in the past couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, and you talked a lot about the Jesus at 138. At the beginning of the season, we were looking at end of the year and Adrian DeJesus and Caden Ricciardi matching up in the state final, 138 pounds, and how tremendous that match might be. And obviously for many reasons, including DeJesus's injury, that's looking unlikely at this point. But even without that occurring, Chase Quinault has now beaten both Ricciardi and DeJesus. Obviously, it was DeJesus at much less than his full potential. But when he beat Ricciardi at the beginning of the season, that was Ricciardi was healthy and wrestling his best. And so Quinault, maybe who's now was a 7th place finisher a year ago, maybe jumps to the top of the line, but is in no way a heavy favorite when you look at Ricciardi still being in that weight class. Again, we don't know about DeJesus, but Carson Walsh, who from Pope John, who is a state finalist, who was a Beast of the East finalist, and then you have Chase Hansen there from Lower Cape May, who is a 2-time placer, was 7th as a freshman, was 3rd last year, has only 3 losses in 3 years in his career, all of them coming in the state tournament. So, he is a kid that, I think could beat anybody and could end up on the top of that podium. And then there's some guys a little further down, like Luke Sherlock, who just came back, assuming he goes 138. That's where he missed most of the season. He's wrestled at 138 if he stays there for the postseason. He's a state place winner. Xavier Ortega from Hal. This is a very interesting weight class. Very interested to see how it gets seeded. Especially again with Quinault beating a couple of state champs potentially in the bracket. But this could be very a very tricky, very interesting, very deep weight class once we get to Atlantic City.
Yeah, you mentioned Walsh being a state a state finalist, but also a Beast of the East finalist. Caden Ricciardi won that match. He put him to his back there, and I know that doesn't sit well with Walsh. And you mentioned how good that weight class is. Gideon Gonzalez, Jackson Slotnick was at that weight class. He's now down to 32. So that's another name at 32. So both those weights are absolutely fascinating. Joe, what's the one that you're looking at right now?
Well, I'm going to mention first, Ryan, and maybe you can touch on it after I'm done with your thoughts. But we all saw that state champion Sonny Amato from Rumson-Fair came down to 144. And I mean, I wonder how much that says about how good Jaden James is, that Sonny Amato would abandon 150 and head down to what is a really good 144-pound class. But the weight that has my attention is 120, and there are a couple of reasons why. Number one, Paul Kenny, the last time we saw him last week in the non-public A tournament, he was in a walk-in boot and did not weigh in or dress in CBA's loss to St. Joe Montvale. Head coach CBA head coach Billy Ashnault, poo-pooed it, played it down, said, he'll be back and healthy for the postseason. And I wonder, because one of the things we saw last year from Kinney in the state tournament was, I think he won three bouts had 3 bouts decided by a point. He's not a truly offensive-minded wrestler. And, if he's not 100%, how does that impact his vision, his ability to score? And the reason I like, 120 so much, number one, it's got Jonathan McGinty there. He's a state runner-up. Tommy Marchetti, the freshman Delbarton, is having a great year. Matthew Gould from St. John Vianney was 8th last year. Amari Van from Delsea is 27-2. He's got a win over Anthony Barametti of St. Peter's Prep at the Cali. Michael Lamb from Haddonfield is 30-2. All these guys score a lot of points, are always on the attack. Now, Kenny thrives off aggressive opponents. He is best at countering, but I think there's a little bit of a question to see how effective he is, especially as the competition level goes up, to see if that leg foot problem is going to be an issue, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, and he's owned the rivalry against John McGinty, going back even to their youth days. Kenny's beaten him every time, but if that injury is significant, that could matter, and that could be what swings it, into McGinty's favor. McGinty wrestled great against Tommy Marchetti the other day. Blew it open 9-2, I believe it was, or 8-2, and really showed that he's just on a tear right now. And he put Anthony Barametti to his back on Thursday. So McGinty, Kenny, I mean, if that happens again, it could be something special. But Jake, what are you keeping your eye on right now? What weight class has your attention in these recent days?
Yeah, so it might seem funny to say because it's maybe the weight class that's the most foregone conclusion, which is 126, where Anthony Knox is. He's going to be vying for his 4th state title, looking to become the 5th 4-timer ever. But the reason to me it's so compelling isn't just for Knox, as great of a story as that is, but it's for the guys behind him. You look at a guy like Nate Braun. Nate Braun wrestled at 32 for a lot of this year. He was ranked for us at 32, comes back to action, drops down to 26. Coach Tom Santoli confirmed to me yesterday that will be his postseason weight. And here you've got a kid who was a state finalist as a freshman, has another state medal under his belt, and he might not even, I mean, he's certainly one of the top 5, 6, 7 wrestlers in the weight. But that's the thing is, if you look at the guys behind Knox, behind Braun, Colton Haggerty from Washington Township has a state medal. Anthony DeAndrea from Watchung Hills has 2 state medals. Mikey Bautista from St. Joe's Montvale has a state medal. Jaden Perez from Del Val has a state medal. Devin Ryan from New Milford has 2 state medals. So, that right there is our top 7 ranked kids at 126 all have at least 1 state medal under their belt, if not more. Braun's made a final. DeAndrea's got a 3rd place finish under his belt. So, there are a lot of great wrestlers behind Knox. And I think the race to get on the podium there at 26 and see where exactly these guys finish is going to be really fascinating. And I think it would be a shame if, obviously Knox deserves all this attention, but to not forget about these guys. I mean, these guys are solid wrestlers. You look at guys like Devin Ryan and Jaden Perez, state medalists from Group 1 schools who are hanging with guys from non-public powerhouses, guys from a Group 5 school like Washington Township. And it's so right that, guys like that can prove that you don't need to go to the big name school, or that you don't need to, go to a non-public school, and you can be rewarded for your loyalty and become a program legend. And that's what guys like Perez and, Devin Ryan have done. And so I think, that way, yes, obviously it's Knox's to lose. We all assume Knox will win it handily. But I think to just reduce that weight to Knox does a disservice to a lot of the quality guys behind him.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it even goes deeper than, some of those state medals. You look at a kid like Anthony Piemonte, who I've mentioned before, and Carter Pax had a great season. Andre Hill, he's probably going to go down to 120, but that's a guy who's, caught our attention a little bit. He won by technical fall over Nick DiFrancesco Antonio, like Jaden Perez did. So it's an interesting weight. And like you said, it goes beyond Anthony Knox, who, we know how good he is. But before we end this episode, wanted to kind of delve into these districts a little bit. The one that I have my attention on is District 2 at Pascack Valley. And this district is a bit like what District 1 has been at Riverdale these past couple years, and now District 1's at Phillipsburg. But as for District 2, you have Bosco that kind of headlines the field, but then you have Glen Rock, Indian Hills, Mawa, Ultapan, Pascack Hills, host Pascack Valley, obviously, Ramapo, Ramsey, and Ridgewood. And the sad reality here is that there's going to be a lot of good wrestlers that just aren't going to make it to regions. And, like I said, we'll see where some of these kids weigh in, but looking at 150, for example, and if these kids weigh in where they did at the county tournament, Charlie Shadow from Ridgewood, who's now ranked for us, Luke Stemkowski from Pascack Valley, Ryan Sullivan from Ultapan, and Christian Fojon from Ramsey, who was the 2 seed in the county tournament. 4 really, really good wrestlers, and one of them's not going to get through. And, to me, that's just absurd, but that's the reality we get, at districts. One of these kids at some of these loaded weights is not going to get through, and that's kind of what makes regions interesting, and it's what makes Atlantic City obviously very interesting. But Jake, what's the district that's got your attention?
Yes, there are 2, both of them in Essex County. One of them is District 11, which is going to be at Nutley. And, the reason this one stands out to me, I think, one, it's a lot of Essex County schools. Of the 10 teams in that district, I think 8 of them are from, or 7 of them are from Essex County. So it's, Belleville, Glen Ridge, Governor Livingston, Kearney, Livingston, Montclair, Nutley, Verona, West Morris, and West Orange. And so, one, a lot of those Essex County schools all have head-to-head with each other, whether it's on the dual meet circuit, whether it's in the Essex County tournament. And, there are 3 guys, really, that I'm keeping an eye on. Nick Adams for West Orange at 138, I think is still undefeated. He's going to be one of the few remaining undefeated wrestlers heading into districts. So anytime you can go into districts with a 0 in the loss column, you're clearly good. Clearly you're not syncing up on anybody at that point. And then the other one is going to be at 57, where Nutley freshman Louis Della Volpe is likely going to see Livingston's Alex Diorio. Diorio was a state qualifier last year for the Lancers. Della Volpe's beaten him twice. He beat him in a duel, and he beat him in the county final. So if that goes to a rematch, and that's the district final, I think that could be a fantastic district final. And, I think that'll be, we'll see. Is the third time going to be the charm for Diorio, and is he finally going to, get over that hump? So I think that's going to be one to watch. And then the other one is District 4 at West Essex, which has Butler, Hawthorne, High Point, Kinnelon, New Milford, Northern Highlands, Pequannock, Pompton Lakes, Wayne Hills, and West Essex. And a lot of these teams have solid wrestlers. Hawthorne's got a kid like Jack Lorper who maybe, flies a little bit under the radar because of where he wrestles. And then, we mentioned New Milford with Devin Ryan, but also Jersey Ryan and Sutter Totaro. But again, the weight there that I'm most interested in is heavyweight, where I assume if everything holds, we'll probably see Mason Brancato, who we have ranked as the number 8 heavyweight in the state for us, up against High Point's Gavin Miracle, who I know Ryan has seen and is a big fan of. And I think, again, that could be, a big-time district final, between 2 of the best heavyweights. And, again, like that could even be, a big region match down the line in Region 1. So I think those are kind of the 2 districts and some of the weights and some of the guys that I'm really keeping an eye on.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. I mean, it's at West Essex. So when is West Essex going to wrestle New Milford? So there's a lot of unfamiliarity there with some of those schools. Bill, what's got your attention right now with districts? What sites are you keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I think the district I'm looking forward to most in South Jersey is District 27 at Cinnaminson. And, there's a lot of really good, solid teams in this district. No great one. Kingsway may be the best team in this group, and this is not a traditional Kingsway team. I mean, we talked about Paulsboro a little bit earlier about how they maybe maximize their potential, even though it doesn't look like a typical Paulsboro season. I feel the same pretty much about Kingsway. That they were missing 2 of projected starting upper weights for the whole season. They graduated a lot. They were fairly young in spots, but they still wrestled a very tough schedule. They beat a lot of good teams. Won a playoff match and then got beat by Southern, and obviously nothing to shake your head about there. I thought they had a very solid season, even though it wasn't traditionally strong, but they've still got some pretty good guys like Tommy DiPietro and Ryan Preziosi, and they'll be really competitive. You get to postseason, and whether they have a kid that might be a little over 500, and all of a sudden he's a district champion. Also, there Delran, they've got some very good kids like Jackson Weller and Chase DeBook. Gloucester is in there, another traditionally strong program. Harry Ulmer's had a really good year for them. Moorestown's got some good kids. Rancocas Valley with Jake Barletta, and some other good guys. They were a playoff team in Group 5. Red Bank Catholic, again, just there's no real. I could see those teams finishing 1-6 in a number of different orders. In that group. That's one I'm looking forward to. District 29 a little bit as well. Even if they do have a team in Camden Catholic that's obviously the dominant team there. You have a Middle Township team there that won their first sectional title. You have Lower Cape May in there, who was obviously right down to the wire with Middle Township, and has Chase Hansen and some other good kids. Absegami's got a couple decent kids. Ocean City was a sectional semifinalist, ended up losing to Delsea. They have Tommy Grimley and Clifford Dirks, who are in our state rankings. Those are the two I think that are kind of really intriguing for me. There's obviously some others, but I think those are ones that are a little deeper, and could really see some good matchups, and not just in the finals, but in the semis and down the line.
Joe, take us home here. What district has your attention?
The district that has caught my eye at this point is District 23 at Point Pleasant Borough. And here's why. During the regular season, Ocean Township defeated Point Borough 47-35. Point Borough would have given anything to have a rematch with the Spartans in the sectional tournament. It never came to be. So if they're going to avenge that loss, here's their opportunity. Now, Jackson Liberty and Manasquan will ripple upon a little bit. Manasquan had a great year. They have Michael O'Connor, who's 29-5 at 150, and a freshman named J.P. Sanders, who's 23-10 at 132. Liberty has Tucker Pazinko, Jordan Ayash. But the big question for Jackson Liberty, and we've been waiting since mid-January, is to see if Armani McCann comes back. McCann was 12-2 when he got hurt. They thought he'd be back for the sectionals. He wasn't. So, hopefully he returns for the district. He's a quality wrestler. But, when you look at Ocean Township and Point Borough, Ocean Township's power comes from the three Volek brothers. Dom at 138 is 30-3. Boomer at 144 is 30-3. And Jake at 150 is 23-11. Now, Point Borough is going to have to offset that muscle, by not only winning first, seconds, but scrambling and taking thirds too in the wrestlebacks. That'll be a big deal. The top wrestlers for Point Borough, Mikey D'Angelo is 21-9 at 106. Jackson Carino, 27-8 at 13. Senior Frankie Bergio, a postseason veteran, is 32-4 at 32. And then there's undefeated Jake Clayton, who I believe will go 65. He's 32-0. So I think that district is going to be interesting from start to finish. And like I said, this is if Point Borough wants to, gain a little bit of revenge for that loss, they'll have the home mat advantage to do it, Ryan.
So that'll do it for episode number 7 of Weighing In, your go-to New Jersey high school wrestling podcast. Thank our producer, Brian Decon, as always, for piecing this together for us every week. And you listeners mean a lot to us as well. So we thank you for choosing us to provide your New Jersey wrestling fix. When you hear from us next, we'll be just days away from regions when the race to Atlantic City draws even closer. Take care, everyone.